My husband, Ethan, was seen by the public as a successful man, leading one of the nation's top technology companies. And I, as his wife, devoted my entire life to supporting that success from behind the scenes. But everything changed 3 months ago on a rainy night. Ethan had just returned from a long business trip. As usual, he handed me his jacket with a weary, "I'm exhausted." It had long been my habit to check the pockets before sending his clothes to the cleaners. That night, from the inner pocket, I pulled out a crumpled receipt. I unfolded it casually, but my eyes froze on the printed date. It was the very day Ethan was supposed to be away on a business trip in another city. Yet the receipt was from an exclusive French restaurant about an hour's drive from our home, a place so popular it was almost impossible to book a table. The order listed 2 full-course meals and a bottle of the finest champagne. My heart gave a sickening thud. Surely, it must have been some kind of mistake. I told myself that and tossed the receipt into the trash. But once suspicion takes root, the stain never fades. From then on, each day felt like walking on thin ice. While I continued to wear the mask of the perfect wife, I quietly began to observe my husband's actions beneath the surface. The way he desperately shielded his phone screen. The increasing number of weekends he went out, claiming it was for work obligations. And above all, the whispered phone calls he would take even if it meant leaving the room. When I asked about them, he would always avert his eyes and say, "It's just complicated work stuff. I don't want to worry you." But behind that mask of tenderness, I began to sense the stench of lies. Before marriage and motherhood, I had worked as a financial consultant, a world where only numbers, not feelings, revealed the truth. Emotions may deceive, but numbers never lie. Instead of relying on instinct, I resolved to verify the facts. One afternoon while Ethan was out playing golf, I entered his study. From our shared computer, I combed through 5 years of online banking records. Hours passed before I finally uncovered a distortion in the flow of money. For nearly 2 years, large monthly payments had been going to an unfamiliar consulting firm called S&T Global Partners. With trembling hands, I looked up the company's registration information. The moment the representative's name appeared on screen, I gasped. CEO, Nicole Johnson. It was my sister's name. And listed among the executives was Ethan himself. My face was drained of blood. Together, they had created a shell company as a front, siphoning our joint assets into Nicole's accounts before funneling them further into Ethan's personal account. The scheme resembled the very tax evasion cases I once investigated professionally. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's betrayal alone was unforgivable, but to know my own sister was involved, it was unbearable. The thought of the two of them laughing together while secretly bleeding me dry made me nauseous. But I couldn't afford to act on emotion. They still believed I knew nothing. That arrogance would be my greatest weapon. I wiped away my tears and resolved to dig deeper into their darkness. The decisive evidence surfaced a few nights later. Unable to sleep, I sat in the study. Ethan was away, supposedly on another trip. My eyes drifted to his personal laptop, the one he never let me touch, claiming it contained sensitive work data. I turned it on. The password screen appeared, and with a silent prayer, I typed in our son Ryan's birthday. Ironically, the lock opened without resistance. He had used his son's birthday as the key to conceal his desires. On the desktop sat a folder titled Important Documents. Inside were digitized copies of our home's property deed, the registration of our vacation home, and contracts for multiple investment funds, all meticulously organized. But every one of those documents had been rewritten, either in Ethan's name alone or under joint ownership with Nicole. And in the places where a signature from me was required, my name appeared. Of course, it was not mine. It was a carefully forged imitation of my handwriting. The folder even contained saved copies of their email exchanges. "My dearest Nicole, it's almost done. When this is over, we'll finally have time together, just the two of us, without anyone interfering. Ethan, when I'm with you, I can finally be my true self. I want you to end this life with Kelly as soon as possible." Let's transfer everything before Kelly notices. Once Ryan's graduation is over, I'll tell her everything and kick her out of the house. I can already picture the look of despair on her face. My husband of 28 years, and my one and only sister by blood. The two people I trusted most had been conspiring for 2 years to strip me of everything I had. Confronted with this grotesque truth, I wept silently until there were no tears left. By the time the first light of dawn crept in, the grief in my heart had hardened, transformed into a cold, volcanic rage. They believed I was still nothing more than an ignorant, fragile housewife. But they had forgotten who I used to be. A professional who once sparred with battle-hardened executives, wielding numbers and law as weapons. I made a vow. I would not let such vile people steal my son's brilliant future, nor the dignity of my own life. I would use every bit of my knowledge and experience to make them pay for their crimes, precisely and in the cruelest way possible. The next day, I went to the office of Jennifer Brown, my old college classmate, now one of the most formidable attorneys in financial crime and divorce litigation. One look at my gaunt face and shadowed eyes, and she understood everything. She combed through the mountain of evidence I had brought and sighed, not just with anger, but with disbelief. Kelly, this is beyond malicious. This isn't just a divorce case. This is outright fraud. Then she picked up an old document, and her eyes gleamed. It was the prenuptial agreement Ethan had once insisted upon nearly 30 years earlier. Back then, he had just inherited a small company from his father. He claimed it was to protect our future from business risks, and pressed me to sign. In hindsight, that contract had been his first declaration of control in our marriage. This marriage will run under my rules. He didn't have to say it aloud. The contract spoke for him. Even then, he must have been wary of me, of my knowledge of finance. Before trapping me in a cage called love, he had first bound me with legal chains. I was young in love, and I convinced myself it was just a formality. Without hesitation, I signed. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I must have sensed the cold imbalance of that paper. I went straight to Jennifer's office, back when she was still a young attorney. For the worst-case scenario, I want you to keep this, I told her, entrusting her with the original document. I never imagined that my faint unease 30 years ago would become the single thread that saved my future self. Kelly, this is it. The very contract he created to protect himself. After 30 years, it's going to become the perfect knife to cut his own throat. Jennifer pointed at Clause 12 of the agreement. If adultery or fraud or concealment involving marital property is committed, all rights to shared assets shall be automatically voided. With this, we can destroy them legally, completely. And so began our silent, meticulous counterattack. We hired private investigators to capture proof of their secret meetings, requested handwriting experts to examine the forged signatures, and discreetly leaked evidence to the banks, the tax authorities, and even the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Every step was aligned with one date, Ryan's graduation ceremony. Why choose that day as the stage for revenge? Because it was the very moment when they would be at their most arrogant and their least cautious. And because exposing their sins in front of family, friends, and every relationship we had built together over decades would shatter their pride in the most devastating form of social punishment. I would never tarnish my beloved son Ryan's brilliant future as valedictorian of a prestigious university. On the contrary, for my son, who was about to spread his wings into a new world, I felt a mother's duty to show him, through my own actions, that injustice is always punished and that society upholds justice. On the very day he set sail into the vast ocean of society, this would be my final and greatest gift. The unwavering truth that there are evils in this world that must never be forgiven, and that such evils always meet the hammer of justice. And then, the day arrived. The hotel banquet hall sparkled beneath the dazzling chandeliers. Friends and relatives had gathered to celebrate Ryan's new chapter in life. Smiles filled the room, happiness radiating in every direction. Ryan, the guest of honor, accepted his friends' congratulations with a shy but proud smile. And there, watching as if it were their own achievement, Ethan and Nicole stood with smug satisfaction. Every so often, they exchanged furtive glances, nodding to one another like victors already assured of their triumph. My heart grew cold, steady as ice. I wore the mask of the perfect wife, the proud mother, engraving every detail of this radiant scene in my mind. They had no idea this joyful banquet would become their last supper. When the host invited me to give a speech, the curtain on my 92-day revenge quietly rose. I smiled graciously, took the microphone, and began with words of gratitude. Thank you all so much for being here today to celebrate my son Ryan. As his mother, there is no greater joy. I remember when he was just a child. But before I could continue, Ethan roughly snatched the microphone from my hand. Oh, let me give the speech. After all, today isn't only about my son's graduation. It's about my own graduation, too. The cheerful murmur of the room instantly fell silent. His voice trembled with alcohol and an unnatural, feverish excitement. Nicole stood beside him, feigning concern, but her face betrayed a look of bliss. I felt my heart freeze into perfect calm, just as I had planned. Ethan surveyed the room with a triumphant grin and declared, I have an announcement. Today, I'm starting a new life. And of course, that life won't include Kelly. Time stopped. The sound of gasps rippled through the room. Bewildered eyes flicked between me, Ethan, and Nicole. At my side, Ryan turned pale, his expression stricken with disbelief. I'm sorry, Ryan. Just endure this charade a little longer. But Ethan's cruel performance wasn't finished. He raised his voice further, pointing straight at me. And one more thing. Don't worry about the house or our savings. All of it has already been transferred to me, legally. Isn't that right, Nicole? With that, he clasped Nicole's hand tightly, flaunting their unity. She flinched with a fleeting flicker of guilt, but quickly replaced it with a contemptuous smirk in my direction. Ah, so that's what they wanted, to see me break down, sobbing, screaming, humiliated, and fleeing the room in disgrace. Instead, I simply smiled. Congratulations, Ethan. And to you as well, Nicole. The smile vanished from Ethan's face, replaced by confusion. Slowly, I reached into my handbag and drew out a scarlet envelope. And I slipped it gently into Ethan's breast pocket. This is my gift to you both. Please, do read it. When I whispered those words, Ethan let out a derisive snort. What's this? I don't need some last-minute love letter from you. I want everyone here to witness just how pathetic you are. With a sneer, he tore open the envelope. Nicole leaned eagerly over his shoulder to peek inside. The entire room held its breath, eyes fixed on them. But the moment Ethan scanned the documents inside, his face was drained of blood. His triumphant grin froze, his eyes widening as though staring into an impossible nightmare. Beside him, Nicole's gaze darted back and forth between the papers and my face in utter disbelief. Well, what? What is this? Ethan's voice cracked, trembling. I calmly reclaimed the microphone from his hand. In the silent hall, my voice rang clear. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unpleasant scene. But as my husband just said, today marks a new beginning. Only it is for myself and my son. Then I turned to face Ethan and Nicole directly. Ethan, did you read the documents in that envelope carefully? The first page is the divorce petition I filed, which was officially accepted 3 days ago. And the second is a copy of the prenuptial agreement you forced me to sign 30 years ago to protect your own assets. Ethan's face froze. He looked down again at the papers in his hands. Prenup? That must have expired long ago. No. Clause 12 states very clearly, in the event of adultery, fraud, or concealment involving marital assets, all shared property rights shall be automatically voided. There is no expiration. And the evidence is overwhelming that you and my sister Nicole conspired for 2 years to illegally transfer assets, forge documents, and alter property titles. The hall erupted into murmurs. Friends' shocked faces. Relatives' eyes burning with rage. Every gaze pierced Ethan and Nicole. There, no proof, Ethan shouted desperately. I looked at him with pity. No proof? The evidence is in your company servers, in the transfer records from Nicole's Shell Corporation, in every receipt from the restaurants you used for your secret meetings. And of course, the forged signatures of mine are already declared fraudulent by the country's top handwriting experts. No, no, Nicole whispered, her knees buckling as Ethan struggled to hold her upright. And it isn't over yet. The credit cards you've been using? They should already be declined. I instructed the bank to freeze every one of your accounts this morning, fully in accordance with the prenup. Oh, and I paused deliberately, then pointed to the last page in the envelope. Did you notice the document bearing the FBI seal? Your asset concealment scheme is already under federal investigation. By the time this party is over, it won't just be your wealth that's frozen, it will be you. Lies. All lies. Ethan screamed, sounding like a panicked child. In that case, why not call your lawyer right now? Though I doubt you'll be able to pay his fees anymore. That was the final blow. Under the searing stares of 50 guests, thick with contempt and scorn, Ethan and Nicole could no longer stand their ground. Like ghosts chased by their own sins, they staggered out of the hall, fleeing into the night. The heavy banquet doors slammed shut. A beat of silence hung in the air, then thunderous applause erupted. Yet the applause never reached my ears. My eyes were fixed only on my son, standing beside me in stunned silence. His face was pale, his lips trembling ever so slightly. A moment ago, he had admired these two adults, his father and his beloved aunt. Now he had watched them exposed and condemned as criminals. In his eyes I saw confusion, grief, betrayal, and, most piercing of all, reverence for the mother who had fought alone to protect him. At last, Ryan turned toward me. His arms trembled, yet he pulled me into a strong embrace. It was not a hug of celebration. It was the desperate embrace of someone clinging to the only certainty left in a shattered world. I felt his shoulders shake against mine. Dad, and Aunt Nicole. He whispered hoarsely into my shoulder. Mom, you fought all this time by yourself? How much pain did you carry alone? It was the raw cry of a son trying to understand, to share in the loneliness I had borne. I never knew. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I stroked his back gently, answering with quiet strength. No, I only did what any mother would do. For you, I would become anything. On that stage of ruins, I felt his warmth and smiled faintly. As for Ethan and Nicole, I already knew where they would run. To the luxury high-rise condo in the city, the new home they had secretly contracted uncovered by the investigator I had hired. Their so-called love nest. No doubt they would hide there, licking their wounds, trying to decide their next move. But the castle they had built of sand would collapse far faster than they imagined. Leaving the applause behind, Ryan and I quietly exited the hotel together. He looked at me with worried eyes. Mom, was it really okay to do it like that? In public? Yes, I answered firmly. It was. I answered him. If I hadn't done it that way, they never would have admitted their sins. And besides, the real judgment is only just beginning. Almost at the exact moment our car pulled into the driveway, a black sedan slid to a stop behind us. From it emerged men in dark suits, their sharp eyes like something out of a TV drama. One approached, showing me his identification. The letters carved into the badge were unmistakable. FBI. Mrs. Kelly Manning? We'd like to ask you a few questions about the information you provided recently. At the words of the man who seemed to be their leader, I gave a quiet nod. Yes, of course. I've been expecting you. All of the evidence is inside. That night, I handed the agents everything I had gathered over the past 3 months, original forged documents, complete records of the illegal transfers, even recordings of Ethan and Nicole's private conversations. The agents were visibly stunned by the thoroughness and precision of the evidence. We've never seen an internal whistleblower prepare something this comprehensive. With your cooperation, we'll ensure they cannot escape justice. After they left, the house was quiet, just Ryan and me. In the home where we had once lived as a family, Ethan's shadow was gone forever. Ryan gazed silently at the family photo on the wall. It's really over, isn't it? Yes, I said. It's over. And from here, our real life begins. I removed the photo from the wall, turned it face down, and set it aside. It was time to sever the past completely. The true show began the next morning. The blaring sound of a news alert came from the television. On screen was the image of a luxury high-rise condo, one I knew all too well. Cameras swarmed the entrance. And then, in front of the flashing lights, Ethan and Nicole appeared, still in their loungewear, their faces drained, their wrists bound in handcuffs as federal agents escorted them away. A storm of camera flashes mercilessly illuminated their faces, etched with despair. Across the news ticker blazed the words, "Prominent CEO arrested on charges of large-scale asset concealment and fraud." From that moment, my phone would not stop ringing. Nearly every call was from friends and relatives, praising my courage, offering their support. To each, I spoke words of gratitude. In a single night, Ethan and Nicole had lost everything. The assets they had stolen were frozen by both my divorce case and the FBI investigation. Their status and reputation were obliterated by the media. And Ethan, beyond all wealth, lost the one thing he could never buy back: the trust of his son. 6 months later, their trial was held. When I faced them again in court, the arrogance they once wore so proudly was gone. They looked hollow, broken. Even the elite defense team they hired was powerless against the flawless evidence compiled by Jennifer, the FBI, and me. In the end, the judge delivered his verdict: 7 years each in federal prison. And under the very prenuptial agreement Ethan had once written to protect himself, all assets wrongfully transferred were legally restored to me. At last, the long battle was over. A few days after the sentencing, Ryan visited the prison on his own. Later, he told me quietly about what happened. Through the glass partition, he looked at his father and spoke with steady conviction. "I'm proud to be my mother's son. She fought, alone, to protect our family. And the justice she showed me, I'll carry it forward in my own life." Then, he added the final words: "Goodbye. I'll never come to see you again." That was the true price of Ethan's betrayal, the complete severing of ties with his only son. They told me Ethan broke down crying in that room. Months later, I sold the house we had lived in for so many years and began preparing for a new life. With the assets I had reclaimed, not just money, but dignity, I finally pursued my dream of founding a company. I named it Kelly Consulting. Its mission: to help women facing betrayal or financial hardship, just as I once had, achieve economic independence and reclaim their lives. My experience resonated deeply with countless women facing the same struggles, and the reputation of my company spread quickly. I was no longer driven merely by profit. I found true fulfillment in helping women carve out their futures by their own strength. 3 years later, my son Ryan, now grown strong and resilient, came to visit me at my new office. Gazing out at the city skyline through the window, he said, "Mom, you turned the worst thing that ever happened into a force that saves others." I smiled and replied, "Yes. No matter how close you stand to the edge of despair, with the right knowledge and the courage never to give up, you can always carve a path forward." I wanted to prove that with my own life. Since that day, I have never once heard from Ethan. His warped pride will never allow him to choose something as humble as an apology. Nicole, however, still in prison, sends me a letter once a month without fail. In them, written in shaky, tear-stained handwriting, she confesses her regret, her foolishness in letting Ethan's words control her, and above all, her sorrow for betraying the only sister she had. Ryan glanced at the stack of letters on my desk and asked quietly, "You still read Aunt Nicole's letters? If, when she gets out, would you meet her?" I couldn't answer immediately. Betrayal of that scale can never be forgiven lightly. Yet every time I read her words, I feel something stirring in me, not hatred, but a faint sense of pity for the blood relative I once trusted. Looking out at the crimson glow of sunset, I finally said, I don't know yet. But when the time comes, I'll decide honestly by listening to my own heart. Beside the stack of letters sits a single scarlet envelope, carefully kept. It was once the signal of my revenge, the very envelope I handed to Ethan. But now, inside it rests a letter of gratitude from the first woman entrepreneur I ever helped support. The humiliation of that day will never be erased. But because of it, I was able to reclaim my true self and discover a new life, one where I can be a beacon of hope for others. My revenge against my husband is complete. And now, here, from this place, my true life is about to begin, brilliant, unshaken, and my own.